Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. A few of you. I hope we have some good interaction. Make it easier when we are a bit few. My name is Frans Davidsson. I work for a company called Psychoacoustic, and we have a promise which we call a sound effect on people, and that is something that I will talk about today. I will dig a little bit deeper into the workplace and acoustic in the workplaces, going into the psychoacoustic, looking into different personality styles and how they are affected by sound. And also, since the people that are working in offices are brain workers, we will dig in a little bit more into the brain as well. Actually, I'm from background, I'm a civil engineer, but it was actually my mom that first addressed me to the topic about acoustic when I moved like 18 years old into my first flat. Frans, you need to get some curtains in, otherwise the acoustic will be so bad. And after a couple of years in construction site, I'm now into the more interdisciplinary approach with engaging with HR, facility management, real estate people, and the construction sites. Because acoustic, it is vital for a sustainable work life. And looking about the workplace today, everything evolves around the sustainability agenda. And the drivers that are being addressed on the acoustic, on the architectural and design today, and the property and facility management, is everything is affected by sustainability. We have the green buildings, of course. We have the health and well-being and the productivity, looking at not only on the planet side, but more on the people and the social perspective of creating a sustainable, long-lasting solution. Also, why I'm here today addressing HR is that you are getting more and more power and involved in the change management process. And therefore, you need to understand what type of demands you can put on the physical environment and on the people environment, and how that then supports the activity that will take place in that specific room and for that organization. Of course, the IT, it's not only about the paper-free world, it's also about you can be more flexible, you can work from wherever. And I still say that the strongest and the most perhaps old-fashioned tool, but still very valid tool, is the voice. That is very much the positive about meeting people. The voice and our ears is actually fitting like a hand in a glove. And evolution have made that happen. And we love the voice of others. And that's where we develop, that's when we communicate, and that's when we bring and move things forward. So engaging and creating an experience and a culture where people actually want to come and share information, that is the key here. Because of course we have the technology to be able to work from wherever, but you will never replace the personal meeting in collaborating with the voice in our ears by the technical part. And also what we have seen, this one is an old slide, but it's very much valid still. It's looking at the operational cost of a building versus the cost of people. You need to putting and investing resources in the people to gain their health and well-being, and also in the long run the productivity. Because increasing and improving the work environment, that is the key for every organization. But there seems to be a misgap here, miscommunication. Leesman Index, which is the biggest benchmark in the world, having more than 250,000 people, office workers, say that noise levels, only 30% is happy with the noise levels. And also another one, quiet rooms for working alone or in pairs, it's also red flagged. So there is a huge misperception or a gap in what people are demanding for and what they actually want. And can it be so bad? So it's actually the physical environment per se. And that is what I will get a little bit deeper into the psychological path as well. But the simple pyramid of productivity and how we reach that. Actually, acoustic, that's just in the bottom. That's like the hygienic factor together with lighting and air quality. If you don't have that in order, you will never be having a successful, sustainable office. I will dig a little bit deeper on that. That is our core business. We know a hell of a lot about acoustic and how that is affecting people. But stepping up the ladder of how to actually reach the true productivity, you also need to understand the psychological perspective on it. And I will address that as well. But the good experience, it's actually all about nature. There is something you might have heard of, which is called biophilic design, that there is an affinity in the human beings. There is a relation to the nature. And when it comes to acoustic environment, our ears and our voice have evolved in that type of environment. It's only now, the last couple of 100 years or so, that we actually spend more and more time indoors with a lot of unnatural sounds and a lot of unnatural reflections from hard surfaces. So by including room acoustic and addressing that and try to mimic the outdoor nature, that's where you create an environment for a sustainable work life for the people. Of course, it's not only about acoustic, it's about the visual, it's about the taste and feeling and everything. But the major part here, acoustic, it's mainly a defense mechanism because it constantly scans off the surroundings from threats, which was actually happening out on the savannah where you lived. So we're very sensitive to small nuances in sound and can determine where from the sound is coming to be able to run in the right direction. So that's the reflex that is built in our system, so to say, and it's constantly on. We can never shut down the ears. The eyes we can actually shut off and fall asleep, but the ears are constantly on. We have an approach we call activity-based acoustic design, where you need to know what type of activity will take place in the room, how the room and that physical properties are behaving, and then what type of people will be using that premises. And then when you match these three together, you will have a good room acoustic design for the organizations. I will start just very briefly to dig into the physical. I can go on and on about how acoustic works and all that, but I will just map out a little bit the basics. Sound, it's multidimensional per se. So when you're actually entering a room, you can so quickly determine whether this is a good or bad conditions. What do you think about these conditions, for example, in this room? You think it's good? I don't really think it's so good, to be honest. But I'm a bit geeky as well. But I think you all felt that when you enter this room as well. And we try to visualize the acoustic a little bit more. There is actually three-dimensional non-acoustic. We have the strength of the room, we have the clarity of the room, and we have the echo or the reverberance in the room. The open plan, which is propagation, it's a bit more tricky because it's about your voice is being spread too far in the open office. I will explain that a little bit more as well. But looking at the brain system, because as I said, we are brain workers, right? We have the reflective brain, which is processing thoughts and thinking about the past, the future, and so on. We actually can think out ideas and tactics for the future. We have the reactive brain as well, which is this fight or flight mode, which is more sensations, let's say. If you have smell or a loud voice or something like that, you react instinctively. And then you also have the archive brain, which is archiving and processing constantly all the information that is coming to your head. The problem is when these three, they cannot work at the same time. And if you're doing complex tasks, for example, and you get disturbed by a sound, that will impact your capability of processing and having a plan. And also archiving that. So understanding about how the different brains work for different type of task is important. Here we have a research from the Berkeley University in California. This is just too simple, finding misspelling in text in loud and quiet environment. Not that big difference, 10% around. But finding logical mistakes, more complex tasks, we can see a big difference. So the more complex task you're performing, the more important is the sound environment. I would like to make a test on you, okay? See how your cognition works, how your brain works. There will pop up a couple of numbers here, which I want you to remember, memorize as good as possible. Don't focus on me, focus on the numbers. Okay, are you ready? Of course, I should talk at the same time to make it a little bit more complicated. You seem to be very focused on the numbers. Roughly 40 minutes I will talk here. Okay, anyone that could give me the numbers? It was a bit disturbing when I was talking, or? 1 to 10? Yeah, in a different way, yeah. But a little bit disturbing. A little bit disturbing, right? And that is the problematic, because we are so curious, because we love the speech. So we start listening to what I'm saying while we're processing and trying to memorize the numbers. And this is also just a research that was actually performed in 1994, the variation of speech versus the background noise levels. And what it says is the speech is the most disturbing when you're performing complex tasks. But at the same time, background noise level is also affecting you. And the louder speech or the louder background noise you're having, it will affect your performance. And of course, when you're being interrupted, it takes a long time for you to get back on track. And this is actually building up stress in the long term, because we have set a target to fulfill each day. And once we're getting disturbed, that builds up stress for a long time. There is actually a theory that it's up to 25 minutes it takes for, if you're really in focus mode and getting back on track. Once you're being disturbed, it can take up to 25 minutes. Of course, all of us here is very smart, so it's only take a couple of minutes, right? But it still can add up quite a few minutes every day. I would talk about the study that we actually conducted with the Stress Research Institute in Stockholm. It's called the Sundbyberg study, which is a municipality just outside Stockholm, where we wanted to see the impact of sound on health, well-being, and productivity. We did it with the Stress Research Institute. The unique with this is, because often when you perform studies, you have it in laboratories, controlled conditions, where you expose people to different type of sounds, right? But then the problem is that it's not actually in real-life conditions. And it's, of course, a very much cost-effective solution of having in a laboratory. So the problematic is actually to do it in reality. But here we actually managed to find a house or an office where we actually were able to do that. We have 2 floors with exactly the same type of work tasks. Actually, it was 151 employees. The interesting part is as well, it was the same interior layout per floor as well. And what we managed to do was that during the weekends, we went in and changing the acoustical conditions without people actually seeing what we were doing. So we managed to isolate the sound. So we see that from a building perspective, we actually just shifted the full-size panels in the ceiling, and then we could alter back and forth. And here's the power of the most powerful thing with this study is that we have a double control group or a crossover design. So one floor started in good conditions, went to bad to good, and the other floor went from bad to good to bad. Because often what you do before and after, and then people are effective, often in a positive way. But here we actually have double control groups. And that's the power of this study, for sure. What we actually did was that the only thing we did was by changing the ceiling, we actually managed to spread the speech longer and shorter. And this is the impact of a good or bad ceiling of the speech propagation. This is a bit technical and nerdy and so on, but just focus on the visual and how it works. Because if you have a hard or soft ceiling, the voice will spread longer or shorter. This is just pure physics, so to say. So if you have a poor ceiling, then it takes 17 meters before it drops half the sound of the speech. If you have a better acoustical ceiling tiles, then it takes 10 meters before it has dropped 10 decibels, which is often perceived as half the sound of the voice. And then if you go up to the best one, it's 7 meters. This is just how the ceiling and the building impacts the speech propagation. Then it's, of course, very much how the building communicates with the furniture. But by putting demands on the building, because if you have a better building, then you have more freedom in the design phase. So it's always a constant battle between the interior and the building. And by having a good and well-designed building, you actually have better possibilities of reaching a good acoustical environment. And what we actually managed to do, the red circles here is just to visualize how far the speech was spread. And the variation between good and bad conditions was 35% in meters. Not big in decibels, very small differences in decibels, but we are very sensitive to small changes. And what we find was that it was up to 16% reduction in perceived disturbance in general, up to 25% reduction in disturbance at close range, up to 21% reduction in disturbance at long range, and also maybe the most important one, up to 11% in reduction in cognitive stress when it comes to improved concentration, memory, and better decision making. So, and this is all significant findings. And it's actually published in Journal of Environmental Psychology as well. So if you want to, we can have a discussion later on down in our booth, and we can give some more information around that. Going a little bit more on the psychological path, what is actually happening when we process the sound and that is coming to our brain. Psychoacoustic per se is actually, it's also already a scientific word, so to say, and that is the study of the psychological and physiological responses associated with sound. Physiological, that we can measure. We can measure heart rate, hormones and stress hormones, blood pressure, and so on. But the more in depth, what we did here is the psychological part. Depending on what personality type you are, will that affect your noise disturbance or not? And what we did was that we, together with Dr. Nigel Osland, which is an environmental psychologist, or doctor, we did a literature review where we actually went through, I think it was almost up to 180 research papers looking on the psychological and the acoustical part, where we actually then developed some hypotheses that we wanted to test. And that we did with an online survey to verify the hypothesis that we were having, where we reached about 500 people, roughly. And then we have actually developed a tool to develop, to apply these hypotheses. So we have a research and evidence-based evaluation toolkit that we now apply in the design phase, the zoning phase, and maybe most of all, the change management phase, because you need to address the acoustical issue in the implementation of a new office, or if you have an issue, you need to address and give them a manual to follow. What we actually found, of course, basic noise is unwanted sound, right? That we all know. Sound is something positive. That is something that we want to hear. Noise is a negative. That is something that we don't want to hear. And in the research summary, or the literature review, we actually found that the sound level per se is only accountable for about 25% of the annoyance. Because in the office, it's not that loud noise levels. It's not that low either. But so what they actually found in office noise, it's only accountable for roughly 25%. So the rest is actually happening within our body and our brains. And that is what we wanted to find out with the hypothesis that we developed. And what we found or hypothesized was that the factors that are affecting noise is the personality type, what type of activity they are performing, where they are performing that activity, and if they have control of the sound or not, perceived control at least, design features, and also some individual factors, which is actually more or less age, but individual factors sounds better. We're actually using the ocean test from Berkeley University, the big 5 traits. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I guess you're familiar with this maybe, but there are a scale, open, closed, extroverted, introverted, and so on. Just to get a fair view of what the type of personalities you're having within the organizations. And the rating scales that we look into is the performance, the productivity, ability to work, concentration levels, distraction levels, speech interference, stress, and well-being. Looking at the performance from this global benchmark, we just asked them to rate, does it affect my performance or not? Negative or positive? And the mean effect is actually -5%. It doesn't seem to be that much, right? But if you come back to the first slide, if you're able to improve 5%, that almost covers the total cost of the building, if you're able to improve 5% of the personnel. Something other interesting is the coping mechanisms. What actions are you doing to avoid the noise? Do you move to another team, build a physical barrier, move to another desk, a little bit, raise the issues with colleagues? Not so much, 10-15%. Move to meeting room. Yeah, it's good if you have the variation and capability of actually utilizing the meeting rooms. Wear headphones, earplugs. That's not a good approval on the design, is it? You have to have that. And that is actually something that we see now after doing some intervention studies, that wearing headphones, that is increasing. Maybe not just listening per se, but avoiding to tell your colleagues, I don't want to be disturbed. That's a visual cue that don't come and bother me. I'm working, I'm focusing. Come in early or work late. I guess we all have done that, right? To be able to focus. Move to a quiet pod or breakout. Yeah, that's good if you have the variation. Work from home or elsewhere if you have that flexibility, of course. Actually, another interesting, not a part of this, but it's a research made here in Netherlands, which is there is a misperception of the needs from the organization of how much focus work they believe that the people are using versus how much the focus work that the individuals are requiring. So the organization seems to believe that they don't need that much space for focus, rather than the individuals see, I need more time to focus. That's need to be discussed as well, but that's something interesting. Looking at the personality differences, everybody is affected, that we can see, but there are also some significant findings between the personality types. Looking at introverts versus extroverts, there is a significant findings on their performance, productivity, concentration, stress and well-being rates, not on the distraction and speech interference. Looking the variation between stable and neurotic personality styles, productivity, concentration, speech interference, stress and well-being, not on performance and distractions. And this is actually significant findings. So that's quite interesting. Also looking at the task and personality. Here we have the introverted and extroverted people. And here we come into the arousal theory. Because stimuli is good to a certain degree. that keeps you awake, that keeps you alive, that's good. But when you reach the tipping point and get overstimulated, that's not good, and then you lack in performance. Then you become not as performance or productive. And when you performing complex tasks, that is actually a stimulation. And if you have too much stimuli when performing complex tasks, you will be negatively affected. So introverted actually have a little bit lower threshold when it comes to arousals. So when they perform in complex tasks, for example, they want it to be quiet. They don't want it to be noisy. Whereas the extrovert, when they perform in simple tasks, then they need stimulation in order to be on the right level. If it's too quiet when they perform in simple tasks, they are negatively affected. So they want a little bit more noisy. And when it comes to complex tasks, yeah, they're quite neutral, but they are definitely affected if it's too noisy. Acoustic design index. Here we just have some ratings. If you have a soft carpet, for example, for impact sounds. If you have a hard ceilings, metal ceilings, soft ceilings, or concrete ceilings, for example. If you have breakout spaces nearby the working areas or not. If you have a kitchen separated or not. Do you have screens? Do you have diffusion? Just to map out what type of acoustic environment do you have in your work at your office today. And here we actually see, here we have the performance and the acoustic design index. If you improve the acoustic conditions, the acoustic design, you will have a better performance in the organization. It's quite a clear link, right? But when we add all these contributing variables together, we have the personality type, work activity, place of work, perceived control, design features, plus the individual factors. We actually now can add on 41% from the psychological perspective, plus the original 25%. And now we have 66% variance. We're getting closer of understanding how noise is affecting or how we should approach the noise issue in the offices of today. And the methodology that we are having now, we have an online evaluation toolkit where we go through the acoustical and physical environments, the roles and activities, the personality profiles, and some individual and maybe also very important the team factors, because there might be a variation between teams as well, which is then feeding in to acoustic treatment, activity layers, zoning layers between working groups, and also, very important, the behavioral layer. How do you behave in the office? And here you might think, yeah, it should be quiet. No, it should not. You should engage. You should talk. You should communicate. You should learn from each other. So it's not about being quiet. It's about creating an environment and office where you can communicate, where you actually have the positive sides. Often noise is very negative, unfortunately, but I like to bring forward the positive about creating a good sound environment where people actually can engage. But in the change management process, explaining how you have designed for the many people in that office, that is crucial. And we have also developed a very simple acronym, DARE, which is a very people-centered approach. Dare to take the fight against poor acoustical environment by displace, avoid, reduce, and educate. Have those four on top of your minds, and then we will get closer to that.